much. I first of all would like to say that I'm not surprised why the topic architecture, engineering, construction. Because I read the topic well, and I found out that construction comes last. So we have to hear the architect, the engineer, and then I would speak to construction. And I hope to do this very quickly. Because there's something about the last speaker not keeping everybody tired, but try and make it as relatable and interesting as possible so that I can get your attention for the next 45 minutes. Before I go too far, I'd like to, thank, I hear this is the 12th, so 11 of this has happened prior to now, and I just really like to celebrate the ATO team coming back here. I mean, I was here when this building was built. I knew when this firm was on our road. So, just coming and seeing the maintenance manager who's been here since, and seeing the team, has been part of ATO for decades of years in practice. Which is why it's interesting, because it's bringing people together. And I dare say this is one of the few architectural firms that has spanned and endured if you like, what you call the challenge of Nigeria over 3 decades of practice. So I'd like you to join me to just celebrate this. Thank you. And it's an honor to be the one to speak last after Engineer Ami. It's been a pleasure to meet you today. The AIM consulting team, and also earlier speaker, architect Kofi, who I think we worked together on Shell Estate, which is one of the ways we started. He was on the Shell Estate in Abuja when AT was the architects and Costain were the contractors. That was about 15, 20 years ago. So it was nice to see him present today. Now I'll try and go through my slide very quickly. I didn't change my topic. I left it because I thought it was very interesting. And forgive me, maybe because I'm a builder by profession. So I have the most slides, and I'll run through them. And I try to do a little bit of I'll run through what I like, which is a bit of history, because I think this topic spoke to history, and I'll talk from my perspective, right? My first slide is just telling you what's in here very quickly. I'll talk about what I call the call. I wanted to change the topic to the call. I'll call it my call to the village, right? Because I think this is some sort of a village, and I'll get to that very quickly. Then I'll tell you about the history, and I use for me, the history that I used to relate to what we learned from the past was what I call the National Development Plan. I got excited when I read about that, and I wish they had taught me history differently while I was in university and I was in college. I dare say a lot of us have to teach ourselves history all over again, because a lot of the history that I have learned, I sort of had to, teach myself. So I'll try and do that very quickly, so that we'll see the history of what my experience has been in the last 30 years. I will speak to the environment, development, and impact. Very quickly, I'll speak to the country, and I've used that to try and explain this history, and I'll talk about the present and the future. So I'll do this very quickly. Next slide. Now, in the next slide, what I talk about the call, introduction to this, I did say I'm in love with history, right? And when I read the topic, I could tell that there's no way you can do this without talking to the history of what's happening in the country, because we are a part of the country. Anybody you see today, whether it's AIM or I see at the back there, or anybody else who you've seen endure the last 30 years, they're a result of this environment, right? And so we can't talk about our profession without talking about the history of this environment and what it's done to all of us, and who have we become, and who are we going to be in the future. So I pretty much that's what my introduction is about, and that's why I speak from the construction perspective, relating this last 30 years to what has also happened to that industry. Next slide. And so I talk about the call, which is about myself. I see this in a way, it's a bit of a calling, right, for me, because I realized that as much as I tried to escape construction, it just, I couldn't run away from it. So I've come to understand that sometimes God just calls us into a profession. And when you find your call, you find out that there's a reason and a purpose why you are an architect or an engineer or a builder. God created you for a purpose so that you can make impact. So it's taken me about 20 years to realize that this was truly a call for me. And I'll tell you why. I mean, interestingly, when I run through this, I'll tell you how that history has shaped my experience. I actually was born in 1970, and I didn't really understand the significance of that year. I did, because that year was when the war ended, and that was when Nigeria, Gowon, became president, and he had the 3 R's, what they called reconstruction, reconciliation, and reintegration, something like that. Yeah, which is very interesting because it sort of propelled Nigeria on a journey that, looking back now, I'm quite excited that I was born just after the war, because I'm sure the experiences of those older than me will be slightly different. And there's something that happened to Nigeria just after the war. We'll speak to that. Then, my experience in the 70s, 80s, I realized that I had some better part of Nigeria. And for the younger ones, this is important because it's important that if you were born in the 80s and the 90s, the environment you were born into sort of shapes your worldview and how you perceive your potentials going forward. So I realized why we were born in the 70s, because I think this was just on the back of what you call the baby boomers. So there was like this push still for, in Nigeria, a level of excellence. And so when I was in the 70s, 80s, going to primary school, that was when I still had the experience of goody goody. Does anybody remember goody goody? You do? Wow, you guys, I know. And Sanko milk. I would eat Sanko every time during break. Milk and orange. Nigeria looked after us, so they were very particular about our health and what we ate, even whilst we were in school. So, I just sort of find out that there was an intent to create a society that would be an excellent society. And my birth time, that 70, 80, was when Nigeria was beginning to carve its future with some sort of clarity. And people like me were beneficiaries of that. In the 80s and 90s was when I got this, why the title I will have given it is what I call Call to the Villa, because that was where I found myself in construction. Because then I was in 1980, I was 10, then in the middle of that I was about 15. And I wanted to go on holiday. I was in Canada then, and I wanted to, like all my friends were doing, out of the country for holiday. And then my dad said I should go to the village and build this house in the village, help join the workers as my vacation job. That is where the story of construction started for me. And from that experience, I got the excitement for construction, working with laborers on site. I didn't like it initially, but I ended up liking it after 3 months. And came back home and I thought, not bad, and then, of course, I now went into that aspect. But of course, I must give credit to my dad, by the way, because he, being an adventurer, he sort of used me as an experiment. I'm his first son, and I'm happy he did, because it's important that it's not just what you're born into, because that really shapes you, but it's what you make out of what you're born into. And I think what I would like to say, and you see this through the thread of my presentation, don't let Nigeria shape you, right? It's critical. You have something inside of you. You've been given an opportunity. They have a lot to complain about. But whatever opportunity you've been given and where you find yourself, make the best out of it. So in that same period was when I got introduced to construction, and I worked with people like Hey Barry and Odusi. This is when you see there was still what I would call the professionalism. Now, 90s and 20s was when I joined Costain, and I was excited to see Costain doing projects. I've done projects that were significant to Nigeria, like the Whoopi project, Neckham House, and the rest. 2000 today is where we are now. And then, why did I say it's a call? Because I look around me, and I realized that truly it was a call for me. My office is now located on Marina, in a house building called Church House, coincident, right next to the CMS, the Church Missionary Society Cathedral, which is one of the cathedrals built by the colonial times when the Anglicans pushed into Nigeria with the missionary journey, how it influenced our architecture and our construction. So I find myself there. But I live in an estate called Tyndale Mansions. Tyndale is the guy who wrote the Bible in English at some point. What else? I was part of the Ecumenical Center building in Abuja. So, Engineer Ami was talking about the bus. Was for some reason Costain, where the company that was called to come and do the Ecumenical building when it was abandoned. And I had a meeting. I had the privilege to meet then General Husseini, because I was operations director by then in Costain, and Costain were asked to come and finish it up. And it was an interesting story I was told by General Husseini that he used to be the first FCC minister, and then he was the one that Pacha gave. Maybe I'll tell that story, but it's interesting because I sat in front of him and he told me how they gave certain amount of money to build mosque. They gave the same amount of money to build the church. But the mosque had been finished, the church was still abandoned, and they wanted Costain to come in and bring all the different parties together to move that church forward. And it was an exciting experience for me because we got in there and the architecture, we had to bring in a Bulgarian guy who was a craftsman to help us build the pillars. I don't know, have you been to if you've ever been inside the Ecumenical Center, you'll see the columns. Quite interesting columns. It's like a hexagon that you had to mold into these spires, and it was quite an experience for me. So just on the back of what he was talking about, that was when I got that exposure, and I concluded that how could I live in a Tyndale mansion, my office is in a church house, and then I did because there must be a call around me because God is saying to me that you're going to be in construction, right? So wherever you're doing, I say that to say, we don't just do what we do because we just like it. Somebody just said, go into architecture, be an engineer, be a builder. And you were called to it. Something called you. That's why somehow you endure all the vicissitudes that come against that call, right? Next slide. So, I will tell you now a little bit about this history that I was talking about. This history intrigued me. And it's what I've used to sort of take the learnings, because I hear the topic is the best of yesterday, how does it help us for tomorrow? So I realized that when I was born in the 70s, Nigeria really were very big and planning. And that's critical because I was born when I discovered that Nigeria had what you call a National Development Plan. And I had to study that plan. It started in 1962, just after the colonials handed over to us, just before the war. And it went until about 1975, so it was like a 5-year rolling plan, right? And so the bulk of what you see today in terms of our infrastructure, what we still use as an urban environment, was all done in the space of this period. In fact, our GDP, I'll show it to you, peaked in 1970. It's never gone back to that. So there is something quite intriguing about this first 10 years of our history and what happened. And so it really caught my attention. Now, going further, look at it. Between 1962 and 1968, post-independence, the first national development accomplished a number of projects. Look at them. The Port Harcourt refinery, the paper mills, the sugar mills, the Niger Dam in Jeba and Bachita, the Niger Bridge, ports extension, construction of a number of trunk A roads. Can you imagine all of this in 5 years, 10 years? Nigeria did that. And I can go on and on to talk about those roads, those bridges that were done. Right? It was also in this period that the country's first generation universities were done. University of Ibadan, the products of which are still helping Nigeria build Nigeria, because it's those graduates from those universities that are still fired up with the passion of Nigeria and are still hoping that Nigeria will get back to where it should be. That same period, University of Ibadan, University of Lagos, both owned by the federal government, Ahmadu Bello University, Northern Region. Next slide, please. University of Nigeria, Nsukka was in the Eastern Region. University of Ife now, OAU was in Western. They were all established within this time. This significant were possible because we had annual capital budget and it was operated within a development plan framework. Right? The second one was between 1977. That was when NYSC was formed, because you can imagine after the war, there was need to reconcile everybody. So the whole idea of the youth service was designed. I benefited from that because I went to youth service when I graduated, and I had to go to the north. By the way, when I went to FTC Kaduna, I realized that because I was from the south, the federal government colleges, which were very good by that time. I mean, my campus in Kaduna was amazing. Designed by, I think, architect Fola Alade, one of the best. I'll talk about him here. If you see my campus, was it Alade?
His daughter is here.
Well, I'm sorry, he didn't design that particular one.
But he designed some of them.
Lagos.
I know. I heard the story. Kaduna. Are you here?
My dad did it.
I know. So you know what? Please put your hands together for this. Now it's significant. I know, and I'll talk to that because the history of Nigeria cannot be told without those two great architects. Do you understand what I'm saying? I referred quite a bit to Folalade in this slide, and I used his name primarily because of the significance of his role being one of the first permanent secretaries that was in the Ministry of Works.
Yeah.
I know that I had to study him. I actually Googled. I had to read his history because it was significant to the story I'm going to tell today. Why I didn't talk so much about your dad? I mean, I know you. You know ourselves, right? I know your brother. I know your dad. Why I didn't say that? Because he came in the Second Republic, right? What I call when Nigeria handed over to the civilians, right? So I'll talk to that.
No.
It was vice. I know, but it was vice. I knew him more when he was vice president, right? Don't worry. All that is good history for those. What I see missing here for the generation. I mean, I have staff. Thank you. Some of my staff are here. They're joining the line. If I talk to Debo, he's an architect. Debo work with design group. He's probably in his. Debo, when were you born? I'm not impressed. Oh, did I embarrass you? Okay. So he can. You see, this generation need to know this history, and we need to speak it publicly. I believe that's the essence of this sort of meetings that architect Ayo has put together, so that we can understand what did we learn from this history and how do we move forward, right? So the whole idea of NYC was a beautiful idea. It was to bring us together. I left Lagos to Kaduna to go and be amongst the Northerners. And I realized that a lot of the people who were on campus with me in Kaduna were from the South. So the language, I love the Hausa language, by the way. And I wanted to learn Hausa by all means. So I only have 5 years to learn. So I speak a little bit of Hausa. But that's helpful, because when I'm in the North, I can relate to the North. And then, but guess what? The language of this campus was Yoruba, because we're all from Lagos. So my Yoruba got better, right? But the whole idea and the essence of it worked for a while. Now, by the third National Development Plan, which was between 1975 and 80, that was when you really had things begin to go south. And you find out that the people who made this happen were the people we call the super perm sex. So there was a sort of partnership between the military and the civilian that made the success of that period so highly, impactful. Okay? And you see my last slide. I actually had to recognize on this slide that the first architect PERMSEC, because of this plan, this development plan, Nigeria was Mary Blade. Nigeria had a focus on education. Nigeria had a plan to make this nation one of the foremost nations in the world. We had the resources and we had amazing people. And in the civil service then, it wasn't just any kind of person that could work in the civil service. And you know those PAMSECs? Some of them are still alive. I will name some of them, and I also give credit to them, because the military saw that to build Nigeria, to have such a vision, you needed people that were capable to drive that vision. And you had people like, the Asiodos, who we know about, and the rest of his team, the Jordans, I met Jordan from the north, the Jamchidas, the Aidas, and listen, Aida. These were the super PAMSECs, all in the ministry. And of course, in our own, if you like, space, an architect joined them, who they recognized. And that was actually Fola Alade, who joined and became PAMSEC in 1976. This was a crack team. And they were taking Nigeria somewhere. Something happened along the way. And I just listed some of the projects that were built in this period. Next slide. Right, and so how did this environment shape our current existence? Because what I've tried to do, I had to create my own sort of basis to measure. I call it environment development impact. What that simply means is that it's almost what happens to, we heard the story of African Americans now. They will tell you that the experience of America is slightly different because most of the generations that are like our generation in the 70s, they only got a picture of what America was like to them because they were brought in to America in a certain way. So the environment they found themselves in shaped their, if you like, their worldview. And so what you're born into really, it sort of impacts how you see your potential. And so for me, environment is key. And somehow I don't understand when people talk to me about colonialism and something makes you, and maybe that's why Nigerians are the way we are. Even there's some other African countries that I met, they say, why Nigerians? I don't think it's arrogance. It's just what you were born into. We were not born to feel we were second to anybody. We were born to feel like we could do anything. That's my mindset. So when you're around, and that's why they say one of the biggest foreign students in America or in the UK, you find out that Indians are doing very well. There was something they were born into. The Jews behave a certain way. They were born into. There's a way a Jewish person is raised. And I think somehow Nigerians had something, especially the baby boomers. We have something about us that we feel we can do it. We had some of the best universities. When I was around, when I was in Kaduna, I saw foreigners around coming to learn. So my mindset was never about we were supposed to be second fiddle to. I felt we were one of the best nations in the world. And so that mindset, I believe your environment shapes you. If you were born in Nigeria today and you think Nigeria is meant to be a failed state, then I'm not going to be surprised you're going to think it's always a failed state. So I'm coming from the perspective of when I was born and what I saw and how I believe in the country, right? And so this is why I use this as my basis to sort of speak to my topic. That the environment you're born in impacts how you develop that environment. That's the summary of this. Next slide. Right, and so that's it. I use three things to talk about the environment. The environment will have to do with social structure, will have to do with financial structure, will have to do with government structure. And that determines the development, because the social structure will talk to the education, the financial structure talks to the economic development, and the government structure talks to the ecosystem. And all of that then creates the impact you want, where you talk about the values under the social structure, you talk about the GDP under the economic structure, you talk about the institutions under the government structure. When we started in the 70s, there was a plan to make sure that Nigeria had institutions, but something happened down the line. We still don't have those institutions yet. They haven't been created, but we started right. And the whole idea of the social structure was to keep Nigeria united, which is why after the 70s, that whole essence of unity was very critical. Because if we're disunited, there's only so much we can do. And somehow, we haven't really come out of that. But there was a plan at that time. I won't go too much into this next slide, but I think you get my gist around what I use to measure and to speak to this topic. So this is just to tell you that under each of this, right, when I look at the environment that I was born into, there was a social ethic at that time. There was something about the way we behaved in Nigeria then. I mean, there were no fences. I heard someone talking about fences, and I grew up in Surrey, and I could go and see my neighbor. There were values, not just in my house, right down the street. If the woman saw me at 7 p.m. at night, she asked me, "Where's your mother?" Everybody cared for everybody. So there was an ethic, there was a mindset. We didn't think corruption first. Corruption was not in our lexicon. It was about, behave yourself. You are the son or the daughter of this person. There was some sort of value to it. The ethics were high. And I was born into that. So it's a bit strange for me to see Nigeria now sort of behaving like all we were ever was people that were always corrupt. I never grew up in that Nigeria. That is a misnomer, and it has to be corrected. Yes. And that's the essence of my coming. Part of why I got excited about coming for this was because it was an opportunity to speak back to the experience I had and to give the younger next generation some encouragement. And I think it's still a journey that we're on. It's not over yet. And that's it. The financial environment I grew up was quite different. Nigeria was not saying they didn't have money. They had money. Nigeria always has money. But then the good thing about Nigeria having money was they had amazing planners and amazing implementers. You need those three. They had economic power, they had human power, so they had natural resource, they had human resource, and then they had amazing implementers. Those three things were critical. We had those three, and we still have those three. It's just that I think we have the natural, the human is still there, the implementers is where the issue is. The implementers have been There's a swap. The heads that were trained in the 70s are now the tail, and the tail are now the head. That's the problem of Nigeria right now. The heads have to take it back. And the next generation, I'm speaking to you right now, you have to take it back. The tail cannot whack the head. It's not possible. It was never like that. I wasn't trained in that environment. Next slide. And when I say take it back, I'm saying use your head. I'm not saying take it back by group wrong. I think what the generation now misses is just lack of strategy. Just a lot of passion, no, you need to think. In the 70s, they were thinkers. They planned before they implemented. But so I'm not saying take it back, but just wrong. No, it's thinking first. Right? So my foundational years, the way I speak to this periods, I took them in 3 decades. My foundational years, I'll talk about the impact it had on the Nigerian context, the industry, and in my career. That's how I've tried to speak to this very quickly. So I'll talk about the foundational years for me, the 1970s to 1980. And these were the golden years, by the way, of Nigeria, because our Naira was then, it was stronger than the dollar, if you all remember.
Yeah.
The dollar was 8 cents, Naira was stronger.
We were stronger too.
In fact, for the first 10 years of this period, Naira was stronger for 10 years. It was strong consistently into 1984. Over 10 years. So Nigeria didn't understand this thing about Naira. We were stronger economically. So it was the golden years. And there was relative stability in these years. And the industry, how did it affect the industry? The Nigerian Enterprise Promotion Decree was done in 1977. And that, I will speak to that because that was what gave me the opportunity. Nigeria, the rulers of Nigeria, or the people in charge of Nigeria at the time realized that during the war, Nigeria wasn't really supported by foreigners as such. So the people who were during the war realized that, from what I found out, and I might be corrected, I heard we funded most of the war without taking any loan, and also we didn't use oil. So it took a lot of ingenuity to economically make sure that Nigerians stayed together during that period. So after the war, Nigeria said, you know what, we have to make sure that Nigerians owned all the foreign companies in the country were good, they were doing well, but there was a decree that said Nigerians must be in charge so that we don't depend on the foreign. We have to own our own future.
Recording in progress.
So that decree was done in 1977, and it changed the ownership structure of quite a few companies. That was how they built the tallest building. Neckham House was built around this period. It was built in the 70s. It was finished in 1976, right? And that was the tallest building in West Africa. But when Neckham House was built, Nigerians were called the giant of Africa because it was a building that nobody had seen everywhere. I mean, it was amazing. It was a sign of our economic strength. And Costain did that project. My dad tells me a story about that project, interestingly. You won't believe that project is not on piles. That project is on a raft foundation. My dad at the time used to work in foundation construction because they owned partly, Costain owned the foundation. And they did all the piles around and soil tests around most of the bridges. So my dad was a soil engineer going around. And interestingly, my dad was part of that. He told me the story of that building, how it never sat on piles. I said, you're kidding me. That was serious engineering. And interesting thing again about that story is that building got burnt in 1984. And Costain was called back to come and refurbish it. By then I had gone to UK for training. And I was the project manager that finished it when it got burnt. So that's a bit of an interesting story there. My dad was in the foundation. I was in the refurbishment. Very interesting. Not planned. But this was the context of our industry in the 70s. Next slide. We were called the giants of Africa, and our professional landscape at the time had some of the best architects. I mean, I was from that. John Hopewood and John Godwin and Hopewood. That was when you started before you joined James Cubic. The professionalism at that time was amazing. Hey Barry and Odusi. Ovarop then became Ovarop. Obi Obembe joined another group and became. So what happened in this period where the foreign companies started partnering with the Nigerians? And they started forming consultancies. And the professionalism and the ethic at this time was phenomenal. So my career at this time was what really, in my own experience, helped my dad, because when they said all the foreign companies had to have Nigerian ownership, so my dad was in the right place at the right time. And he was one of the trained engineers with Costain. And so that decree alone, he became the majority shareholder of Costain. And he brought the board together. And and you can see the purpose of that whole intent decree. Because of that position he had, he gave a lot of Nigerians exposure. I benefited from that. Because if that decree wasn't made, and Costain, an international company, with that kind of exposure, having a Nigerian at that level, so you can imagine the impact of knowledge he got and how he used that knowledge to open doors for a lot of other Nigerians. So that decree also worked. And I'm benefiting from that. In fact, the fact that I'm standing here today on APD was because of this foundation. And a lot of us, I'm sure AT will speak to that as well. His experience in James Cubic prior to that, the people that are sustaining the future of consultancy in Nigeria and construction are those people who truly saw what professionalism was like in the 70s and 80s. And they've held on to those values. So, next slide. I won't bore you. Let me move fast. Next slide. I was going to speak to what Nigeria was like in the 70s, 80s. When I was in 70s, we had UTC. I used to go to the 90s. It was malls that were being built now were built in the 70s. When you go to UTC, it was amazing. I went to the National Theatre to watch a concert. Incredible experience for me in my 70s. Our airports, I went on train from Lagos to Jibunoh. I love train rides. Who have overnight stopover. Oh boy, that was Nigeria. So now we enter this decade. Sorry, just go back to the next slide very briefly, because at every decade there's what I take away as the benefits of those decades. At the bottom here, this is where. Sorry, is it the next slide? The one before? No, the one before this. The civilian. No. You're going forward. Go back, please. Go back to my. Yes, go to the next slide. The best practices I saw happen here was professionalism. There was a quality, there was an ethic for quality. So if you go to Costain, if you look at the building, when we were doing the refurbishment of Costain, coincidentally somebody got trapped in the walls one day. I was a project manager, by the way. By the time I came back to Nigeria, trained in the UK, they gave me the knowledge and I was demonstrating it on site. So I was project manager for Necom House. I handed it over to then Olariwaju, who was the Minister of Telecommunications. I wasn't 30 yet. So you can imagine the exposure I got at 25. It was phenomenal. At 25, I was already being exposed to amazing construction. I was talking to the Minister of Telecommunications. I handed over that building to him before I was 30. I joined the board of Costain at the age of 30. I was sitting next to the chairman of the board then was the Emir of Kano. So my dad gave me amazing exposure. That was what I was born into, because they were committed to giving the next generation exposure. And on that side, I remembered as project manager, the vault, somebody got trapped in. And we had to rescue him before the night, because the vault then was amazing. The thickness of the wall was probably close to a meter. There was a bank, it was built, the lobby on the ground floor was built for a bank. And the safe lock, somehow this guy went into sleep and he shot, and we couldn't get him out. Nobody knew how to unlock the safe. And this guy was going to suffocate and die. Somebody saw him in there. So we started drilling to break through from the top slab to rescue this guy. When we punched the first hole through, we had to pour water in there, because the guy was already almost dying out of just sheer heat. What it took us to break that concrete, boy. And for me, I saw the resilience of how people united can do anything. But we were there for hours trying to crack this concrete open to rescue this guy. The first hole we saw through that thing was amazing. We were so excited. We poured water down to him very quickly. I was starting opening up that hole until we were able to pull him out. But the thickness of that concrete, the strength of that concrete, my boy, the quality Nigeria used to build houses then. So professionalism was an ethic at the time, and I can't tell you how professional everybody was at the time. The policeman, the architect, the builder, the way they taught me how to fold drawings. When I went to work with HFP, when HFP were building Dolphin Estate, and that was my experience. There was nothing in Dolphin Estate. HFP had an amazing architect lady, ATOAL, Romania. Do you remember her? Amazing architect. She designed furniture. She designed everything for HFP. She was my mentor, one of my mentors. I had many mentors. I was one of them. I used to go to his house in London just to sit down and say, when I grow up, I want to be like him. I just such a cheap daddy. And I did that deliberately. I used to come to your office to sit down and learn. And that was the kind of ethic the professionals had at the time. She taught me how to fold drawings. Just to say, learn how to fold the drawing first before you start getting excited. Because if you don't have the ethic and the patience to fold a drawing properly, to make sure the lines were straight and make sure the logo was at the top of the fold, you can't start drawing it. You can't start running. Calm down. And that helped me. She gave me pens, all the rotary pens, different sizes, and said, learn how to label. Use the small one, use the big one. I was a builder, but she wanted me to have an ethic that for me to be a good construction person, I must know what goes into these drawings I'm using. And it slowed me down. It made me think. It gave me critical thinking. It gave me problem-solving skills. It taught me how to collaborate. Essential skills to become a professional and to be successful in whatever career we pursue. So the level of professionalism was amazing. The quality was amazing. The excellence was amazing. The patriotism was amazing. That was the benefit of what I took from this decade. Patriotism was something else. Nigeria, they taught me in school to sing songs. I still remember them. Ìwé kíkọ́ láìsí ọkọ́ àti àdá kò pé o. Iṣẹ́ àgbẹ̀ iṣẹ́ ilẹ̀ wa ẹni kò ṣiṣẹ́ àbàjáde. They taught me that in school. It was an ethic Nigeria wanted to have in everybody. And for those who don't speak Yoruba, what it means is that without education and a hole, if you don't have a hole and an education, you'll be a thief. And don't be a thief. That was just a song. And I didn't even know the meaning at the time. But that was the national orientation of Nigeria.
Yes.
Next slide. Next slide. So this is when they started to get oriented. Because the Palm Sex were sacked in 1975 for whatever reason, and that whole vision just started going like this. You see the graph I plotted. And I think that was the beginning. Now, you can ask so many questions, why did it happen? That's a different story. I won't go there. I'm not here to try and speak to the history should be learned. I have my own interpretation of it. So that was when it started going. And this is when by the way, in 1970, go and check it, the GDP of Nigeria grew by 21%. It's never gone back to that since that time. Never. 21% growth. By 1980, our growth had plummeted to 4.2%. So those super Palm Sex, they claim, because by 1974, our growth was 11%. So some of them still claim that if they had continued, Nigeria would have been, you wouldn't have recognized Nigeria today. You can imagine an average of 10% every year from that time would have become greater than. By this time, by the way, there was no Dubai, no South Korea, all those countries were learning from Nigeria. Malaysia, they were coming here. So something happened in this period, 1980 to 2000. To 2000, yes. And I won't bore you with all of that. This was when the first Japa syndrome happened. I was in school then in FTC Kaduna when they started using my name to promote those that shouldn't check out. Japa didn't start today. Japa started then. That was the first Japa. They said, Andrew, are you checking out? Do you remember that commercial?
Yes.
Everybody in school then. I was 21, yeah. And they said to me then in school, they used to say, Andrew, are you checking out? I'm not checking out anywhere, man. Sorry. 1984, yeah. Andrew, are you checking out? Because the Nigerians were saying, they started seeing the Japa. That was when all the Nigerians who were in Unilag, all the ones that were trained, who knew that Nigeria was the head and not the tail, said they couldn't take it any longer. That was when they went, the first diaspora left. Next slide. And what was the impact on the industry? You saw that all the buildings that I talked about that were built in the 70s, no maintenance culture. Yeah. They started abandoning them. That was when we shouldn't have issues of power, because staying built in Wopi paper mill. If you heard the story, when the man who built it told me the story, incredible. We were supposed to be producing paper in Nigeria, the best around the world. So Russia was a good place to produce paper because of their wood. Nigeria was another country that had amazing paper from our trees. So there was a plan, global plan for trade was during, I think, summer, it would be Russia, during winter, Nigeria. And the paper mill that was built here was next to nothing. When that man tells me the story, he became MD of Costain. He said he's never seen a country like we built that paper mill, world class, never used for one day. So you can imagine Kainji Dam. We had a plan. We were going to roll our steel. We had our paper mill. We had the best power plant. Incredible. Everything was built. But this was when they started getting abandoned. Our refinery. Port Harcourt refinery. I don't want to go. In fact, by the way, I heard it was just at the first turnaround maintenance of Port Harcourt refinery. The first turnaround maintenance after it was built. That was when something happened. People just realized that, oh, we don't need to really maintain this thing. Because in that period, to shut it down, there was a hiatus to import fuel, to let foreign fuel come in. So whilst the maintenance was going on, that opened the door of a new experience. People just saw, oh, you can import fuel. Oh, and this can be done. Let's forget this one. And from that point on, that's a different story. So this is when that whole story started. And what was my experience in this time? That was when Nekamal's got bought, by the way. So Nekamal's, so that was when this decade, right? And you can see the relationship between one of the highest tallest buildings now getting bought in 1984, which is how I got involved in that, right? And then in this same period, what would I say the best practices were for me? That was when we learned endurance, resilience, and then because when you find yourself in this period, what made us survive? We had to learn how to be entrepreneurs and to have amazing management skills. Next slide. This decade is when Costain was sold, by experience. So you see how that impacted the company. By this time, anyway, all the big firms that were in construction in the 70s, Taylor Woodrow's, they started leaving. They also started leaving because they didn't see the future. They couldn't relate. So what was the context in 2020 to now? Our GDP came down by 2000. Our GDP was 0.58%. And then we started again. The journey now started again. We now started trying to give credence to education. Education had been lost. We started again. That was when the new president then now tried to bring due diligence and education back. What was the industry context? That was when the telecoms law came in, and all of a sudden the GSM revolution happened, and that brought in a lot of exposure. And the South Africans said, "Oh, what? Nigeria has money. You mean you telecoms? Boom! MTN made so much." And then South Africans came and started building malls again, and that sort of brought another line of all that renewal, what we had seen in the 70s. Next slide. And what was for me, this is when I met ATO. And this is when we worked on. So for me, this endurance, resilience brought about for me to see companies like ATO doing projects like Shell Estate. It was incredible. Shell Estate was one of the first estates I would say I had ever seen. Built by Shell, lovely design, and Costain were there. Then we went to Port Harcourt from there. ATO did that as well. And then that relationship started. I became operations director, and then ATO came to do the federal secretariat in Port Harcourt, the governor's lodge in Port Harcourt, and that was how we started. Right? Amazing. But I was privileged to have been in the group of consultants I met at this time. But this was where resilience started to build relationships. And what was the best practice at this time? I had to, because at this time Costain got sold. Because at that time my dad too said he was a shareholder, he ran it as a corporate entity. It was the first construction company to be listed on the stock exchange. Construction company. First construction company. So he took it to that level. I remember then the NSC DG, this is Onyike, you all remember her? She was like the top champion woman. She just always, I went for a few board meetings there because I became operations director. And every time she saw my dad, she'd go like, there was this kind of chumminess amongst those who knew themselves in the 70s and 80s and saw Nigerians building things right? But Costain sold. Not so disconnected from the experience we had at the ecumenical center. Not so disconnected. Because at my young age, I had to sit in front of the then former minister of FCT who had retired, Jerry Hussein. And he told me the story personally of how the ecumenical center was abandoned. And he asked the question himself, what's wrong with you guys? And I also asked, what's wrong with you guys too? But that experience, we did it halfway, and we handed it over to Jibunoh Construction, I had to stand in front of the president then because my dad asked me to come and prove to the president that we could do the job. And Obasanjo was the president at the time. I went to the Akpabum was the architect, and he said, Andy, go and speak. And I spoke to the president then to say, sir, can we finish this project? That's a different story. And at that point in time, we then decided to sell because my dad, for whatever reasons, and that gave me my opportunity as well because I was so excited. I said, we can take this company forward. We are the young ones, the new generation. I said, you guys, don't worry. I've seen Nigeria enough. Go and start your own company now. And that gave me the exit into private sector, entrepreneurial management skills. And I think it was a blessing in disguise because if that hadn't happened, I wouldn't have had the opportunity to go into private practice. So, next slide. So I just try to paint, I've covered the 3 decades I was talking about. So this is how it looked like, 1970, we were at over 20, growth 25%. 1980, we were at 4 point, then 2000, we started climbing back up again. Just to give you a sort of a diagrammatical view of what it looked like. Next slide. Next slide. And you see what it looked like, right? This was when Nigeria was strong, high quality products, low competition. Then you see it dip there, and then you see it try and come back up over those 3 decades. Next slide. I'm almost there. I hope I'm not boring you, and I'm trying to make sure that I don't just go beyond my. I'm almost home now, right? And then where are we? Current state. So we are still in that journey of civilian democratic, right? We now have a lot more private sector involvement. We now have threats that are beyond us, just also external threats. And then, in all of this, we still have weak institutions. And I can tell you the story of weak institutions. Remember Circle Mall, one of those malls that were brought in, and my own interpretation of it. Built, nice mall, great experience, but then, first time, the weak institution around it, no security, there was a threat, and they burnt it. As nice as it was, so that's the truth, that's the reality of Nigeria. You build a nice house on a nice street, and you put your gate, but if what's around you is not secure, you're just a sitting duck. Institutions protect not just your own property, it protects the whole society. We still have those weak institutions. And I think at that point, by the time it got burned second time, they just said they're tired of this story. But somehow they refurbished it. Development. Where are we? We have a bit more advocacy now. We still have high inflation. Next slide. And you see how all of this has affected our institutions. General Mr. Anil was talking about Nigerians. Nigerians are phenomenal. We can build, if Costain built the tallest building, we're now doing high rises. Architects, I know too many projects where Nigerians are doing. We can build these things. It's not complex. Right now, we're even the ones driving most of these constructions that are going on right now. I don't have any issues with partnerships and foreign firms. It's good exposure. But the current state begs of us that the rest of us that are remaining, we must take it on and we must continue the ethic. And I'll try to speak to that as I close. So the current state, there's a bit of revival of manufacturing. We're trying to get back there, right? And now there are concessions and collaborations happening. There's now a bit of urban renewal growing on. Now technology has come into assist. And then you have this creative industry that's booming. It's just that it hasn't boomed yet in other sectors. So what's the impact? There's Japa, and I believe the Japa that's in that will happen. Yes, I speak to all of this because, like I said, this environment has impacted, and I hear the next generation all complaining. What's the quality of architects we have today? What's the quality of engineers we have today? What's the quality of the construction people we have today? Is impacted by the environment and the decline that you see in that graph. Because you see it so quickly now. Everybody wants it fast. Nobody wants to go through the patient process. The values have dropped because they see somebody just making it and they wonder, they don't know what it takes the process to really make it. That's just temporary boom. And so it's impacted the quality of work today. So you see a contractor, he wants to do it quick. He's looking at that time, integrity was number one. I see consultants today compromising. They want a deal. Everybody's trying to do a deal. Whereas, once a deal comes into the whole system, once the head is corrupt, which is what Nigeria is, the whole system gets corrupt. You can do a deal with the tail and the hand, you can cut it off. But what do you do when the deal is only on the head? Cut off the head, the whole body dies. So it's important that what we need now are head people who are truly leaders who will not compromise on those ethics we saw. So what am I speaking to environment? Why am I using history? It's because it impacts the quality of what we produce as architects, as engineers. So we now have this state government accountability case, Lagos as a case study, because I believe that Lagos still has the reservoir of all the professionals. Everybody is still living in Lagos. Those who were in the 70s are still here, 80s. They remember the story. The professionals are still here. So Lagos has a significant role to play in future shaping Nigeria. I'm not surprised Lagos is now in the center because it still houses, and so hopefully Lagos will pull all the other states up. Because what's going to happen now is Lagos is now being challenged. Everybody's challenged. Oh, Lagos did this. Oh, Lagos has this new law. Oh, Lagos has this rail. We must do our own. So I think Lagos plays a significance in the story of Nigeria, and the professionals that are housed here are really helping in that story. The school, out of school children is still there. Many school children are out of school. The attrition rate is still, it's sad. I mean, all you need to do is stop on the road and you see children running after you. It's actually desperate time still. A lot of work needs to be done. Why am I in education? It's because I'm really passionate to get those children out of the road. We can't do everything through universities any longer. We need to give them technical skills. So there's a lot of work to do. Now we have what we call developers. They're now the ones driving the industry. And it's good, we should give them credit. Because they've seen an opportunity and they realize that government is not really developing much, the environment is not good. Consultants are wondering who's going to develop. Institutions are not doing it so much. They know institutions are weak. So developers saw this space and said, hey, we can create a business. And they're doing well. Last 5 years, it's gone up. In fact, we are quite a bit of our clients are developers now. Next slide. So, what's the future like? And I'm almost home. So I said the best practices summarized from the experiences I've just shared in the last decade of professionalism. I sort of borrowed them. These are the best things I took from the past. Because we take the best of these decades and see how to apply them now to the help our future. So we need that professionalism to continue that we had in the 70s. The quality I talked about, the excellence, the patriotism, which our ethics and values of the 70s. We need the endurance, resilience, entrepreneurial and management skills of the 80s. The corporate governance, partnerships and collaboration of the 2000s. I didn't want to speak too much. I didn't speak too much about corporate governance because that's helped my firm. Because it was APD, Dolphin Works before. I had to learn corporate governance. I had a taste of it when I became director of Costain because I had to go to LBS for a director's course. And that was where people like the doyens of industry taught us, Christopher Colladays, how to understand corporate governance. And so to be on the board of Costain, I had to understand that there were certain ethics that drove companies and level of integrity amongst us to make sure that we held each other accountable. And I had to learn that at 30 when I was on the board. But I sort of learned it through older people. But I had to learn it again when I now started my own to realize that what will make my company endure are those values. And so that has helped me because now, during the course of Dolphin Works, the corporate governance company saw us and now became part of us. That's how I became APD. So I'm now on the board of Africa Plus Partners. They are on the stock exchange now, so I see my story coming back again. So I had to learn corporate governance. So I had to have good books. I had to make sure that I had auditors that were standard, good, world class. I remember them telling me, the auditors now, they're good, but you're stepping up. You need to get this quality. And all of those things has helped me now, right? And so all these practices that we see from the past is what we now need to apply to push Nigeria back into the future that we want to see. And what are the areas I see that we need to work on? We need to have good plans again. And education, it has to come back. The values must come. The head must be the head, not the tail. And you see professionals now, a politician becomes the head, and then you lose all the values. You say, well, I'll pay you. And then the guy says, oh, he's the one that has the money. So it's okay. No, it shouldn't be okay. We should be able to walk away from projects if it doesn't fit our values. Otherwise, we're encouraging. Yes, and we do that. And thankfully, I still have a few of my older boys here, 80, but the people that we're looking at and say, hold the value for us. We too will follow those values, and those following us behind should hold those values. Because we need to have and that will hopefully bring a stronger civil service. We need that back. People who can be in those services in the government, and we're doing that through interaction. Because right now, a lot of the commissioners and some of the people in government, even the governor, they came from the private sector. We're holding them accountable as well. We're saying, hey, come on, we need to speak the same language. Nigeria was never the tail. So we need a bit of a new orientation. Orientation is critical. And then, that competitive environment, I don't need to, anybody can play, but don't tell me that only one kind of person can play. No, give everybody an opportunity. Then we need collaborations, more, to build institutions. I can't be an island. Let's say it's my street and only my own company will succeed. No, your company succeeds, the next neighbor is poor. What's going to happen? It's going to come after you. So we need collaboration. We need partnerships. Then we need this PPP. In fact, APP, I've got that right. Why I'm partly there is because they are using pension funds to build back the infrastructure. And so that's through some level of partnership. So they are in power. So we built the power plant in Asaba, for example, 8.3 megawatts, just using pension funds. So they were approved as a pension firm to manager of pension funds to invest in infrastructure, to invest in power, education. We built a hostel in Calabar, 400 rooms, just by using funds to back up infrastructure. And so there's a lot of partnerships going on because really, government said they don't have the money to build back institutions now has to come from the private sector and such ingenious means. That's the opportunities that we see now. A lot of advocacy needs to happen because right now, look at the master plan, it's just everywhere. It's everywhere. It's just everywhere. Still no advocacy, but hopefully we'll come back so that our cities look organized because it affects our psyche. Why you love certain environments, the ways the roads are. So I'm happy to see the roads they're building now. It looks orderly, it looks fine. We need order. Order helps the mind and the way you think. And, it builds your ethic, builds our ethic. And we still see opportunity for that. The rule of law has to come back. And then the creative is not just in fashion and arts. And that's good. They open the door to show that what Africa can do. So now everywhere in Africa, everybody's watching Hollywood, but everybody's watching. They haven't seen the engineers. They will soon be watching the architects in Nigeria. Because we need to go back to that ethic of using, harnessing who we really are. If they can do it in the creative, they can do it in we can do it in the built environment as well. Next. I close on this. So the history of modern architecture, engineering, and construction in Nigeria reflects the journey of hope. As we look towards the future, it is vital to embrace development planning and merge our education systems. I pause to say that. What's been missing in our development plan? Really, you don't just go to school. I mean, I went to rebuilding technology. I graduated, I had no clue. So I had to go for a 3-year course in Costa State to teach me how to apply the knowledge to construction. And so what is missing is, and what we need to get back, development planning is, you know where the country is going, and you train everybody. That the education system is based on that. I can't be telling you about STEM to go and work on NASA, and you go to America. You're not useful to Nigeria. What's our natural resource? Why are we training people to export them? I'm on certain schools, and I did that because of exposure. As you know, 8 years I was on the board of Governing Council of Grange. Yeah. It's a British school. I have no issue. Right now, I'm the chairperson on the board of Lagos Prep. Yeah. I don't have any issues with that. We can train some children to go abroad, fine. But not all of them. Some are here. But, the development plan says Lagos State is building railways now. How many people know how to maintain a railway? What's going to happen after 5 years? Why are we not training? And it's an employment opportunity. So we're not training people, and our education is not based on our needs, our gaps. And sometimes they just bring new things. I don't know, someone's education is confuse me. Teachers and owners of school. So everything is foreign. America is doing STEM, we must do STEM. America is doing AI, we must do AI. America is all right. What's going on? Electric cars, everybody's going after it. We have our own natural resources. Are we thinking how to use them and train people? If I will teach you to go on the cloud and leave the land, meanwhile land has food, and you're not going to go hungry. Nobody wants to go into agriculture. What's going on? We must change the orientation.
Yes.
And that is foreign. How are we going to grow our economy if we want to all be foreign? The only reason I dress on Thursday, Friday, I wear traditional. I'm not objecting to wearing a blazer and a shirt. I thought I was coming to a high-tech office, so I did it. But I'll be honest with you, I wear it out of choice. But I must be thinking that, no, this is not me. English is not my language. I love Yoruba. In fact, Madam, I'm thinking your wife. You know what she does? As educated as 8 years old, I came to your house in North London. I came to come and see you. I brought my wife. You've been part of my family. And every time she sees me, as educated as she is, she still speaks to me in Igbo. She wants me to know that I am educated, but my language is important. So we must get it back, and we are with this. So that whole education system is something to look at, and standards towards supporting this plan. Prioritize responsible development and collaborations, and leverage the expertise of companies that add value to the Nigerian project. I end on this. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I think this is like a call to action. Call to think, and a call, a call to order. Thank you very much. I think it's always good for me to I don't really know the direction in which we are going. I think for me that's part of the excitement. I don't know what they're going to say. I don't know, what is going to happen. And you see that our three speakers have spoken from three completely different directions. That's what we wanted to happen. Does anybody have any question?
We're still digesting.
Yes, sir.
I have a question for.
Sorry, your name, please.
My name is Oyeba from ATOAL Consultants. I'm a town planner by education and a graphic designer by training. So, in your presentation, from the first to now, something is missing that no one has mentioned. When I started as a draftsman, and I know the beauty of rotary pen, I know the beauty of stenciling, but do we have that now? Has technology not taken away the beauty of draftsmanship? If you look at detailing in the 80s and up to 93, you don't have it anymore, because now you can just tell all manner of software to do rendering for you, and you give the client, and the client loves it. But where is the detailing? When they brought us, let me use that one, when they brought us GSM, landline died. If you go abroad, of course, you have been there. The most expensive building you buy abroad are usually bungalows with good landscaping. Where is our architecture before we embrace foreign style? Where is professionalism value? I mean, we are talking of the future. If we don't address all this, the future is bleak. I'm asking you, what is the way forward?
Thank you very much. I spoke to that in my last slide, the way forward, right? And I use those values because I have sat with a few people that I've tried to learn from, and we sort of downplay the value of these soft skills, these values of hard work. It's an ethic. You have what you call it. Like I give you an Western work ethic. It's an ethic. There was Europe had two ethics. Italy had an ethic. Germany had an ethic. It was an ethic in the society of hard work. Japanese Confucianism has an ethic. In fact, because you like it, there's a study in the room of Confucianism, but I don't know where the other ethic is. But why am I speaking to this? A nation has an ethics, and what we're bringing back is those. Those are the things that drive your value system. I'm not going to compromise. I'm not going to sell for morsel of bread my whole year. It's happening every day. People just give up all those values because of small things, personal. So that is important. That nobody can do for you. Nobody can do that. We have personally, first of all, to take responsibility of our values. That's where it starts. Then it impacts on everything else, the quality of our deliverables. Now, that's where you see somebody who is the Commissioner of Education, and when they bring him AI, he will say, wait, balance the education system. Don't just embrace all of this. So some of us find ourselves in places like that. You find yourself, you're a leader. All of us are leaders. And where I can add my own little value, where I can be a decision and say, no, don't bring all of this here. How will this benefit those children on the streets? We must think like that. And so I think a lot is the values we have and how we continue to stand on those values as Nigerians, because we've been there before, we can do it. So I do agree with you, because I personally think that the brain, way it thinks, look at when COVID happened, people lost their brain. Somehow, they didn't think about immunity again. They didn't think about the natural food we have and things like that. It's critical thinking. You must be able to think critically. Not everything that you see on the line, we take it on hook, line, and think. We can't think. Why? Because we've lost the ethic of who we are. So I don't believe all those things they taught us by using the rotary to write. So even as parents, we parents have a responsibility. I teach my children. I don't want them to just be on the computer. I take a responsibility. Right? Let me see your writing skills. And the school they're in, I'm on the board of the school. Why? I was in when they're doing PTA. I'm talking to the school. No. That's not real. My child won't learn that. No. Well, people, yes. But if we let everything just come on them, then we don't have any people who don't know who we are. So it starts from us. And so that art of using that thing allows your brain to work well too. There's a value to it. I'm not saying don't learn how, learn everything, but don't lose the core. Because if you know the way, the how, the why, you understand what the computer can do. Computer is just a tool. And so that's why I'm speaking to that whole STEM thing and all that stuff. I don't have an issue with that. Learn maths, learn English, not understood. It's very important, don't get me wrong. I'm just saying, what value, where is Nigeria's plan for the next 5 years? Let's put those things that are critical at the top for education too. But there are some basic skills we all have to have, whether you are going into engineering, and those are personal development skills, management skills. How do you collaborate with people? Are you a good team player? Are you a problem solver? Do you know how to make decisions? And do you have interpersonal skills? Those things those are things you get from your environment, but you need them. And some of the men I've looked at, they will tell me, we don't hire for altitude. You can have the first degree in architecture, but if you don't have the right attitude, you're useless for a lot of people. Because you can't teamwork, you can't collaborate. So those values first, then the foundation. And that is personal. So everything else is adds to that. So I agree with you. But most of the push of this you see is I'm trying to speak back to those values. Then you build everything else.
Okay. Two things. Number one, when I saw Jibunoh, I was kind of saying Jibunoh, and incidentally, I had a little stake at the bank, and I happened to be your dad's account officer. Yes, so he used to summon me to the INEC. What's the name of that building? I call it like Echo House. Yes. So I always come there, and after doing banking, he always give the lectures on nation views. So I'm glad to see that being an industry person, you have given us a better view of the development. And what I saw, I was getting excited at 1970s. And then when the graph moved to year 2000, and you were speaking, I started getting really angry. But at the base, you were objective enough to say what you gleaned from that time was entrepreneurship. So I said, okay, it's not so bad. Some light at the end of the tunnel. But this is the challenge now. Competition and enterprise. That is where some of us who are running construction companies get frustrated. So we try to compete, and to compete, we try to get lean, we try to get efficient, we try to get our pricing right, and then we'll go to compete for a job that has been awarded 3 months ago. So it happens, and we start getting frustrated. You are on a job, you are trying to get your system so efficient so that you can be very competitive, but the job you are competing for is already at 3rd floor. And the newspaper publication just came out. So if you see some of us really getting frustrated and leaving the company and leaving, you are saying we should hold the line. The pressure from the water, this dam is cracking. So I need you to speak to that, because if entrepreneurship is what we gain from this very dark period, this is the thing pushing it.
I get you, and I totally hear you. And it's a genuine. Sorry, I had to bleed through my presentation. I was speaking very quickly, but really, I wish I was a lot more calm. But this calls for a calm response. The truth is, and also values are incredible. And maybe I use myself as an example because in my journey, I think that when I left Australia, it was a bit of a shock for me. Because, so you can imagine, I had a brand new car, I was an executive director, I had my club membership, I had what I lived in about my bachelor, I had the company looked at me, and all of a sudden, because of the economy, but that whole thing left, and I started all over again. They took my car. So that was my first deep. What kept me? Because it was quite an experience. It wasn't funny. I just married them, and the question was asked: how are you going to raise your family? In Nigeria, that's tough. And I have this conversation with my dad once in a while. He says to me, he says, "This was not how it was. It's tough for you guys." And at that point in time, it wasn't him trying to, because you make the best of what you have. So I'm a great dad. I thank him for it. But he never wanted, I stood by myself. He made me, and that helped me because I wasn't pampered or anything. You do your own, charge your own course. So that was the first thing for me. What kept me? My life. I actually started a company. I said, no, I wouldn't do, because I saw a lot of stuff in that regime that as big as we got, we lost the values. I said I would start golfing works, I won't compromise, I won't collect the bribe from anybody to get a job. And a lot of that had to do with my faith, my principle as a Christian. I said, if I really say I'm a Christian, and I have an ethic, I shouldn't be a representative of what they say, who are you really? You say you're a Christian, you're collecting bribe. Then better be just be atheist. So I tied my faith to my ethic, and of course, doesn't mean you believe you work hard. So I chose my values. And I remember then they said, yo, you can't do any project in construction if you don't give this and give that. And I said, no, I'm going to do that. That was significant. Because when you make a decision, people recognize you. And I have clients, I'm online. Most of my clients actually give us work. I don't think I have had to look for work since the last, when I started golfing, to be honest. Because actually people give us work. I have my start because of my values. I'll be honest. I have to promote that. I have to speak to that because people just believe that it's not possible. I have to stand here confidently and say it's possible. Because I have clients who have called me and said, Andy, we know you don't take bribe, we know you don't cheat, so we're giving you this job first. I'm telling you. And we get tenders for that. It's a tough journey. It's not going to be easy. When they took my car, it was painful. I had to ride Okada as easy. Some people, my car, when I was in Costa at 20-something, people loved my car. I was dealing with CEOs. I sat with governors. If I wanted to choose the road of the governors, before they became governors, I knew some of them. Because I was in a position of power, so I saw them. So it didn't make me respect people in government because they were there, because I saw them before they became. There were people that were suppliers when I was a director in Costain. They became a governor. They were our medical doctors to help us with our patients. And I saw how Nigeria can just make somebody who don't sometimes just find yourself there, and then because you're there, you think you're better than, you will not change my values. No. But it's painful, it's a journey, because in that period they took my car. I had to go on a car as somebody who was ED. But I said, no, I'll start small. GT gave me a break. First gatehouse I did, somebody who had been on Beckham House project manager. I did the first gatehouse. I said, I'll start from somewhere. It was painful. I swallowed my pride and walked out. I said, I'll follow a chart and I'll chart a course. So it's not going to be easy. That was my first tip. When we did that, AP, Dolphin was grew. My last job was billions of naira in Abuja. On the AP, starting with bank branches, I did a complex in Abuja. Housing estate. But then I hadn't learned corporate governance. So the company, another deep economy, and my value system was challenged because I said, no, I'll still stick to this value system. But in that project, I almost lost. I lost construction in that project. That's how I moved to project management, because I said, we need good project managers, because if the project manager had managed me well, I wouldn't have let that project be deficit, or that kind of value of projects. That's how I moved into project management. And in that period of another deep in my, and sometimes the best entrepreneurs are those who have suffered setbacks. I led that project in debt. The banks were calling me. So first time I lost my look, and people who, my driver left me by the time I left Costa. Yes, because he didn't have faith that I would survive as an entrepreneur. Because he had this blue shirt on, the Costa sticker there. I didn't have any shirt. I've not done any design for nothing. He left Spain. But I said I would do it. Guess what? After 5 years, he came back because Spain started having problems. That's what value does. Kept me strong. The first 3 years, 5 years, wasn't funny. That second dip, I then decided, I said, I will set up this company to a standard that it will have a bit more strength to withstand the economy. Because I had another dip there. That project painfully. So, summarize. That's all I can tell you. And it pays, let me be honest.
It pays.
It does. Yeah. Because right now, I just told you the story. I don't have any issues. Right now, I'm telling people where you're going to. There's too much work to do in Nigeria.
Yeah.
I just started doing my APT stuff. You see us, I have too many clients. Right now, I have clients. Thank God I endure. Thank God I can encourage the young ones now. But it's not a journey overnight. It's a journey. It's a consistent record. You must stand by it.
I don't know whether there are any other. Okay, senior, you can. No. Okay.
No.
Hello.
Shout your loudest.
Good afternoon, everyone. Right. So, thank you very much for the presentation. It was very insightful. But this is my question here because a lot of things talk about nation building. So my question is, how can this happen? Because I'm also very passionate, right? My own little way, I try to even participate in politics in children, and I see that I'm probably most educated there. I'm not the people that are determining who's going to lead us, who's going to, voting. And I'm almost like the only person that's even enlightened in the whole place. My wife also teaches and dedicated to schools. So bad. It's terrible. I have no idea. So what I'm trying to say is, how can we really, because we can talk, what are the action points? What can we really do to actually begin a movement? I'm passionate about it. So that's my question.
Thank you very much. Thank you. There's always that complex thing, how do you do it? It's always a big question. And you see, you have to commend ATO for this, because this is how you do it. I talked about one of the values you need now for this period. I've spoken about values a lot, and teach 21st century skills in schools. All the how to critical think, how to problem solve. Those are very good skills, by the way, because it's what you keep encouraging. And when we have gatherings like this, what are we doing? We're learning from each other. We're learning, and I use collaboration. You have to learn how to collaborate, and we know ourselves. It's about critical planning, and there's something important here: strategy. You have to have a strategy. If you look at that, we do a SWOT analysis. What is the strength, weakness, or opportunities, strengths? You sit down, do your own SWOT analysis. You're in an area. What do you do? How do you survive this? You must plan critically, and when you find out that when you have a strategy, you will find a way through. Because your strategy will have a duration to it. Okay, the first 6 months I must do this. This one I will do. So you must think ahead of the challenges you see. What are your opportunities? What's your strength? If I'm going to sit with you, I will have to do your own analysis and ask you, what's your strength? You seem to have a passion. That's one strength. But you have a threat. You just said it here. What are the opportunities? So you sit down, and then when you note that, you now begin to plan. You have to have a plan. And one of it that's key that I can tell you, because I don't know all this, and I'll be honest with you, we're trying to change, I'll give you my own steps, for example, in Lagos State. Why am I going back to 1970? Because truly, I am now having to engage government a lot. I can't avoid it. I've been doing it since Fashola was governor. And one of the things I had to do in my own little way, just imagine, just passion. The governor actually approved for me to take like 3 commissioners to Malaysia to show them how to do technical education, how it's done in Malaysia, and let them come and replicate it in Nigeria. Just me, passion, sheer passion. I don't need to know. Not that someone say you have to have a name. You have to know. Sometimes you just go to the office and sit down, and everybody thinks these governors and all people are all evil. No, you have to interact, engage. It's a strategy. Because if you don't also engage and raise the bar, because some of them just don't know. So it's a good thing you're there. I must commend you. Well done. But what you should be careful for while you're there, you have a strategy. Because if you don't, you get swallowed up. And you must sit down and say, what's my strategy? How do I survive this environment? So I collaborate with people. I have those who are watching out for me. I have my values intact so that the system does not swallow you up and you become a non-entity. Because you must remember that you are the head there. You're there for a reason. So I'm in different groups, by the way. I'm in different groups. And we're doing some amazing things. Sometimes just share passion. I'll just give you an example of what passion does. And right now, what am I doing? I'm actually with the Chamber of Commerce right now. I've been relentless. I'm actually just recently trying to speak to the chamber to say, these are all private sector people. You have to begin to develop the curriculum because you know what students need. So if you're an automobile, let the Innocent and the Toyotas come together and help drive that curriculum because you need experts who diagnose cars electrically, but we don't have any curriculum for that. I'm in construction. I'm trying to do curriculums for bricklaying now so that I can give real education to the people that need it because I know there's a gap. I had to use my influence. I'm in the midst of people and I'm trying to craft. So what AT is doing today is also not giving up. 12th lecture. Why? Bring people together to think, to collaborate. I've gotten cards today. I've been related with more people. We've known, some of us in this room know ourselves. You know ourselves. And we're holding each other accountable. Now, if I see some of you here, I'll ask you, what are you doing? Have you sold out? Are you now the tail? Yeah. So AT is doing this as well as part of the strategy. It's a strategy. So we need to come together. We need to be the ones that are really, I've told the history so that you know where we were. And so whilst you're in the list of those people, fantastic. You must have a reason. Why did you go there? Don't just go because I want to be important. No, there's a strategy to it. Then if you have that strategy and it's strong, they won't influence you. You'll be the light there. They need direction, by the way. You can't be abusing the guy on the road. Does he know any better? Have you educated him? He's a child of the environment he was born into. If you were born in the streets, how are you going to behave? So we too are quick to criticize. We don't want to engage. We don't want to get our hands dirty. It's not going to work. But we need to be strategic, not that you just go in there. And so for me, am I ready for politics? My dad never went into politics. It's a strategy for him. So he still has a basis to talk to some extent. You have to have a strategy. I hope I've helped you. Yeah.
No, I just wanted to mention that you hadn't brought up trade schools and city guilds. All of those were there in the past, whereby you had your bricklayers, carpenters that were certified. And I think that's one of the major areas we're missing, and we need to find a way to work on that and bring that back.
100%. 100%. In 1976, I had to do this history myself because it was important to find out that we actually had the National Board of Technical Education set up in 1976, based in Kaduna, for the singular purpose. Because based on the National Development Plan I just shared with you, we need to build fast and quickly. So we had to build these roads, these power plants, this steel rolling mill. So we needed engineers, we needed artisans. We needed people who will fix these things and not depend. So we needed to set up a trade school. We needed to set up a technical education system. That was when he was giving birth. And you'll be shocked what this passion took me to look at what happened to those schools. And in Lagos, we have 5 of them. There's one in Ekpe called Ekpe Technical College. No, Ekpe. And although I remember the location, I went there, massive campus. Had every lab you can think about, mechanical lab, furniture, joinery, automobile, construction, and all those labs were built. You see a car. When I went to Malaysia, they were training people how to fix cars. Young engineers, not that's people that were from school. You do a competition, they open all the bonnets, and you see them in 1 hour, rewire it. And you see how people were learning. And that was the idea in the 70s. So they had the guild. We had CCM guild, you're right. So what we did when I just spoke to this about 10 years ago, so what happened? This passion I told you I just took was to bring back that ethic. And I'm still there till today. You can imagine I worked with the last Commissioner of Education in Lagos State. And we built a center for learning. You know, you have labs for chemistry, labs for. So we said, let's have labs for electrical wiring. Let's have labs for air conditioning. So she started a comprehensive school program. So you have a comprehensive school. We did one in just by the husband there. I went there. I have a lab there. Actually, instead of we had an AC lab, the plumbing lab with it. I brought private sector together to build it so that they could have the children, because the children were leaving after JSS. When they started JSS, the way it was, the 63-4 system, the idea behind it was you do your 6 years primary, 3 years junior secondary. When you're leaving JSS 3, you have an option. You either go to a technical school or you go to secondary school. That was the plan. And it's still there. But what happens when they leave JSS 3? Nobody knows about the technical side. It's not been developed, it's not been enhanced, so everybody's going this way. Whereas when they graduate, when the one want to go to university, the universities can only take maybe about 600. At the time, maybe it's gone to 1 million now. Well, applicants were about 7 more. So the attrition rate of those who couldn't get into university, and it's been annual for the last 20 years. So every JAM, every GSS, the attrition is at 2 levels, GSS 3 to SS1. What happens now? Most of the numbers that enter at GSS1, they leave in that transition. They don't even go into SS1 again because they don't see the opportunity when they graduate at SS3. Nothing happens. So what was happening in Lagos State is a lot of them are leaving at GSS3 and are going to trade on the road. So the attrition rate at GSS3 is high. Then at JAM, another one. Because not all the universities can take them. So there has to be something done. So that's what we're trying to do. And that's on, it's a job on, it's actually on, right? There's a lot of emphasis on that, but it's slow. So it's critical. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank